For Imogene, at 64 years old, 35 years of marriage ended with 3 suitcases on a Philadelphia sidewalk and an ex-husband checking his Rolex while his new wife, 31 years younger, waited in the leather passenger seat of the car Imogene had helped pay for. Her adult son wouldn't answer her calls. Her daughter told her the settlement was more than fair. Her savings would barely cover 3 months in a studio apartment. And when Imogene spent the last of her divorce money on a boarded-up Victorian house in a forgotten Pennsylvania coal town, a property so lost to time it had slipped off the county's current maps, everyone said she had finally broken. But Imogene had seen something in that abandoned house that 35 years of shelved architectural knowledge she'd buried to be a wife, had prepared her to recognize. And with her own hands, at 64 years old, she began to bring a forgotten building and a forgotten woman back from the dead. The house Imogene restored left historic preservation experts speechless. But what she uncovered inside those walls, another woman's erased legacy, her own buried purpose, the architect who had always existed beneath the supportive wife, changed everything. This is Imogene's story. Proof that knowledge never expires. 64 isn't too late, and the best revenge is finally living. Subscribe now, because dreams don't age. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Imogene Rasmussen was 64 years old, and standing on the brick sidewalk of a Chestnut Hill Street, she had called home for 28 years, holding a ceramic mug of tea that had gone cold in her hand, watching movers carry her belongings out of a house that was no longer hers. The divorce had been finalized that morning. 35 years of marriage dissolved in a conference room that smelled like industrial carpet cleaner and Hollis's expensive cologne. The numbers had been read aloud by his attorney, a woman named Margot something, who Imogene was sure was kind to her own mother, but who read the terms of Imogene's dismissal with the flat tone of someone reciting lunch specials. Hollis kept the Chestnut Hill house. He kept the shore property in Stone Harbor. He kept Rasmussen Construction and Development, the company Imogene had helped him start in 1992 by drafting his first real set of blueprints for free on their kitchen table. He kept both vehicles. He kept the retirement accounts in his name, which, it turned out, was most of them. Imogene got $42,000. $42,000 for 35 years. "You're being dramatic, Jeannie," Hollis had said when she stared at the number too long. "That's liquid. You'll land on your feet. You always do." He said it the way you'd encourage a contestant on a game show. Sienna Brooks was waiting in the car. Imogene had seen her only twice before. The first time 6 months ago, at a holiday party Imogene hadn't been invited to, but had gone to anyway, because she was still, on paper, Hollis's wife. Sienna was 31, a corporate attorney at the firm that handled Rasmussen Construction's contracts. Long dark hair, a laugh that could cut glass. She had looked at Imogene that night with a mixture of pity and embarrassment, as though Imogene were an antique chair someone had forgotten to remove from the room. Now Sienna was in the passenger seat of Hollis's Range Rover, scrolling on her phone, waiting for her new husband to finish the last piece of old business. The second suitcase hit the sidewalk with a thud. Then the third, a garbage bag of shoes. A box of photo albums the mover had labeled fragile without understanding what fragile actually meant. Mom. Trevor was standing on the porch. 42 years old. Her firstborn. A commercial real estate broker who worked out of his father's building. He had not offered to help her carry anything. Dad's trying to be reasonable. $42,000 is a lot of money. It's what's left after your father moved the rest, Imogene said quietly. You can't prove that. I'm not trying to. Trevor looked away. His loyalty had calcified years ago into something that looked like pragmatism, but was really just fear of losing access. Hollis was his boss, his landlord, his golf partner, his future inheritance. Imogene was his mother. Hollis had won that equation long before anyone had said the word divorce out loud. Kendall, her daughter, had at least called that morning. Mom, I know this is hard, but you have to be realistic. Dad's moving on. You need to too. Take the money, get a nice little apartment somewhere near the main line, figure out who you are. Figure out who you are? as if Imogene had been misplaced, as if she hadn't spent 3.5 decades being exactly where she was supposed to be, at PTA meetings, at Trevor's baseball games, at the Rasmussen Construction Christmas dinners, at the Chestnut Hill Garden Club, at the hospital bedside when Hollis's father was dying, at the church when Hollis's mother was buried, being the woman the life required. The Range Rover horn beeped lightly. Hollis checked his watch again. Sienna didn't look up. Imogene picked up the first suitcase, then the second, then the third. She carried them one by one to the curb, where the rideshare she had ordered was already pulling up, a silver Camry with a chipped windshield, and she loaded her entire life into the trunk of a stranger's car, while her ex-husband looked at his phone and her son stood on the porch of a house she had chosen, decorated, and defended from storms for nearly 30 years. When the car pulled away, Imogene did not cry. She didn't look back. She looked straight ahead at the back of the driver's headrest and felt something strange settling in her chest, something she hadn't felt since she was 21 years old in her final year at Cornell, standing in a studio at 3 in the morning with a drafting pencil in her hand and the blueprints of a building she had designed on the table in front of her. It was the feeling of having nothing left to lose, and underneath it, quieter but unmistakable, the first faint hum of being awake. The extended stay motel on Route 1 in Bensalem cost $71 a night and smelled like carpet shampoo and somebody else's cigarettes. Imogene took a room on the second floor because the ground floor faced the highway and she needed, if not quiet, at least the illusion of it. She unpacked one suitcase. The other two she left zipped. She told herself it was temporary. The first week, she slept 13 hours a night. The second week, she couldn't sleep at all. She called Kendall on a Tuesday. Voicemail. She called Trevor on a Thursday. He picked up on the fourth ring, said he was heading into a meeting, and promised to call her back. He didn't. She stopped calling after the third, unanswered week. The math was simple and brutal. Hollis was their future. She was their past. They had done the arithmetic long before the papers were signed. Her savings fell faster than she'd imagined possible. $71 a night was $2,130 a month before she had eaten a single meal or paid for gasoline. She applied for apartments in Roxborough, in Manayunk, in Ambler. Everyone required first month, last month, and security, plus proof of income she no longer had. A teacher's pension from the 5 years she'd worked before Trevor was born paid her $612 a month. Her Social Security wouldn't kick in at full value until 67. She watched the $42,000 drain like bathwater. One night in the motel, unable to sleep, she opened her laptop and typed her own name into a search engine. Imogene Rasmussen. Nothing came up. Not a profile, not a byline, not a picture. 35 years of her life had produced no public record. She tried her maiden name, Imogene Vass, and there, 4 pages deep, she found a line from a 1986 Cornell Daily Sun article about an undergraduate design competition. Imogene Vass, third-year architecture student, received honorable mention for her adaptive reuse proposal of the Ithaca Rail Depot. She sat looking at that sentence for a long time. She could still see the drawings. She could still smell the vellum. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time. So if you're enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. She had met Hollis in the spring of 1988, 3 months before her graduation. A mutual friend's engagement party on a rooftop in Old City. He was 26, already running a 2-truck demolition outfit that he swore would be a construction empire within a decade. He had told her, that first night, that her hands looked like an architect's hands. He had meant it as a compliment, and she had taken it as one. She had been accepted into the graduate program at Penn. She had been offered a junior drafting position at a boutique preservation firm in Center City. She had been, in every measurable sense, on her way. Hollis had asked her to marry him 9 months later. He was charming in the specific way of men who have decided exactly what they want from life and have begun assembling it. You don't need grad school, he told her on the porch of her parents' house in Lancaster. You'll learn more on real jobs with me than you'll ever learn in a studio. I'm building something, Jeannie. I want you in it. She had believed him. She had believed, too, that the preservation firm would still be there in a year, or 2, or 5, when the business was stable and they could breathe. Trevor was born in 1990, Kindle in 1993. The preservation firm merged with a larger group in 1995, and the junior position evaporated into someone else's career. Imogene drafted Hollis's first commercial bid on the kitchen table in 1992, while Trevor slept in a bouncer at her feet. She drafted the next one, and the one after that, for free, because they were a team and the money was their money, and what was the difference? By the time Rasmussen Construction was incorporated, she had stopped signing her drawings. By the time they bought the Chestnut Hill house, she had packed her drafting tools into a cedar trunk in the attic and set a framed photograph of her 3-year-old daughter on top of it. The trunk had stayed closed for 27 years. In the motel, on a Thursday in late October, Imogene drove back to the Chestnut Hill house while Hollis was at work and asked the cleaning woman, a Honduran woman named Marisol who had cried when she heard about the divorce, if she could go up to the attic one last time. Marisol unlocked the door without a word. The trunk was still there. Dust, 2 dead moths, the photograph of Kendall at 3, unchanged. Imogene carried the trunk down 3 flights of stairs by herself. She loaded it into the back of her 2011 Civic. She drove back to the motel. She did not open it that night. She sat on the motel carpet and looked at it the way you look at something that might still bite. She opened the trunk on a Sunday morning with the motel curtains drawn. Inside was a life she had forgotten she owned. Her drafting set in its mahogany case, the pencils still sharp. 3 rolls of vellum drawings from her final studio at Cornell. A stack of sketchbooks. Her senior thesis, bound in navy cloth, titled The Ethics of Restoration, What We Owe the Buildings We Inherit. And at the very bottom, in a manila envelope she did not remember placing there, a folded letter on cream-colored stationery, the handwriting looping and deliberate, postmarked October 1994. The letter was from her mother's older sister, Great Aunt Theodosia Merriweather, who had died in 1997 at the age of 91 in a nursing home in Scranton that Imogene had visited exactly once, as a teenager, under protest. Theodosia had been the family's quiet embarrassment. Unmarried, childless, rumored to have lived with a woman in Philadelphia during the 1930s, cut out of her own father's will, barely mentioned at holidays. Imogene's mother had spoken of her only in the careful, lowered voice reserved for relatives the family had decided not to love. The letter was 2 pages long. Imogene read it 3 times before she fully understood what she was holding. "My dear Imogene," it began, "your mother tells me you're pregnant again, and that Hollis has asked you to stop drawing. She says this as though it were good news. I am writing to you because I was once a young woman who was asked to stop drawing, and I did, and it is the only decision of my life I would undo if I could. You're the only person in this family who ever asked to see my plans. I am leaving something to you. Not to your mother, not to your brother, not to your children. To you. The paperwork is with Mr. Kellerman in Ravenscombe. When the time comes that you need it, and only you will know when that is, go and ask him. He will explain. Until then, tell no one. They will try to talk you out of it. Your loving aunt, Theo." Paperclipped to the second page was a business card. Howard Kellerman, ESQ, Kellerman and Sons, 14 Front Street, Ravenscombe, Pennsylvania. The card was 30 years old. Imogene sat on the motel carpet for an hour, not moving, holding a letter written to a woman she barely remembered being. She called the number on the card that afternoon. Howard Kellerman had died in 2008. His son Howard Jr. had retired in 2019. But his grandson, a quiet-voiced man named Barrett Montclair who had bought the practice outright and kept the old files, answered the phone on the second ring and went silent when Imogene said her name and her aunt's name in the same sentence. He asked her to drive up the following Tuesday. He said there was a file. He said had been waiting a long time. Ravenscombe was 2 hours and a world away from Philadelphia. Imogene drove north on 476 into the old anthracite country, past towns whose names she vaguely remembered from high school history. Hazleton, Tamaqua, Shenandoah. The mountains turned from green to rust. The billboards thinned. Ravenscombe itself was a single main street of red brick storefronts, half of them boarded, a diner, a hardware store, a funeral parlor, a law office with Kellerman's still painted in gold leaf on the window. Barrett Montclair was 38 years old, wore a cardigan, and handed her a folder so thick she had to hold it with both hands. "Your aunt purchased this property outright in 1961, he said. She placed it in a private trust in 1994. The trust was structured to transfer to you upon your application and presentation of identification. Property taxes have been paid every year from a pre-funded escrow account. The house has not been legally occupied since 1972. It is, as far as I can tell, the only residence in this county that does not appear on the current municipal tax map. An error, apparently, from a digitization project in 2003. Nobody's corrected it because nobody knew it was there." "Where is it?" Imogene asked. 3 miles north, end of Meriwether Lane. You'll know when you see it." She drove. The road narrowed to a single lane, then to gravel, then to a rutted track through second-growth woods. And then the trees opened, and there it was. A queen and Victorian. 3 stories. A wraparound porch collapsing on the east side. A conical turret rising above the tree line, its slate tiles patched with moss. Gingerbread trim rotted to lace. Windows boarded from the inside with plywood gone gray from 50 years of weather. The whole structure leaning slightly, stubbornly, refusing to fall. And behind it, almost hidden in the overgrowth, the second building. A smaller, square, carefully proportioned carriage house with a gable roof and narrow windows placed with the precision of someone who understood light. Imogene got out of the car and stood in the dead leaves and looked at the house and felt something move in her chest that had not moved in 3 decades. She called Kendall from the driveway. "I'm keeping it," she said. "I'm going to restore it." Kendall laughed. Not cruelly, almost affectionately, the way you laugh at a child. "Mom, you're 64. You can't even live there. There's no heat. There's no water. You said it's falling apart. Take the property, sell it to whoever will buy it. Use the money for an apartment. Please, I'm not selling it. Mom, this is a breakdown." "No," Imogene said, looking up at the turret, at Theodosia's turret, at the house that had waited 50 years for someone to come. "This is the opposite of a breakdown. Goodbye, Kendall." She hung up. She walked toward the porch. She slept in her car the first 3 nights because she was afraid of what she would find inside. Not ghosts, exactly. Something closer to responsibility. Opening a house that had been sealed for 50 years was a commitment she was not sure her body could keep. On the 4th morning, she pried off the plywood over the back door with a crowbar she bought at Ravenscombe Hardware for $14. The door itself was original, solid oak, swollen in its frame. It took her 40 minutes to work it open. When it finally gave, the smell that came out was not rot, as she had feared, but something drier and older. Dust, cedar, old varnish, the faint mineral ghost of coal smoke from a chimney that had not drawn in half a century. She stood on the threshold for a long time before she went in. The interior astonished her. Theodosia, or whoever had closed the house in 1972, had done it properly. The furniture was draped in muslin sheets, now gray with dust but intact. The plaster walls were cracked but not collapsed. The original chestnut floors ran unbroken down a central hall 12 feet wide. A curved staircase rose to a second-floor landing lit by a stained glass window Imogene had not been able to see from outside, a geometric pattern of amber and deep green that threw colored light across the runner when she swept the dust from the glass with her sleeve. The banister was hand-turned. The newel post was a single piece of quarter-sawn oak with a small brass medallion set into the top, engraved TM 1894. Theodosia had been born in 1906. The house was older than her aunt. Her aunt had bought a house built by someone else who shared her initials. Or Imogene stopped on the landing. Or Theodosia had changed her name at some point and come home. She filed the thought away and kept walking. She chose the small second-floor bedroom above the kitchen because it had the least water damage and a working flue. She cleaned it for 2 days. She bought a cot, a camp stove, a battery lantern, a 5-gallon water jug, and a propane heater from the Ravenscombe Hardware, whose owner, a man named Peter Hofstadter, watched her purchases accumulate over several trips and finally asked, without judgment, "You're in the old Meriwether place, aren't you?" When she said yes, he nodded once and gave her his cell number in case the propane ran low. The first month was assessment. Imogene walked every room with a clipboard and her drafting pencils, measuring, sketching, noting. Her hands remembered what her mind had forgotten. The proportions were elegant and deliberate, not the ostentatious queen and of pattern book builders, but something restrained and precise, closer to the shingle style in its sensibility, with rooms sized for human occupation rather than display. Whoever had designed this house had known what they were doing. The mechanical systems were a disaster. Knob-in-tube wiring, a boiler from the Eisenhower administration, a well-pumped seized solid. But the bones were extraordinary. No sag in the main beams. No movement in the foundation. The roof, miraculously, had held. She made lists. She ordered materials through the hardware store, paying in small amounts because she could not afford large ones. She learned, by watching YouTube videos in the diner where the Wi-Fi was free, how to repoint a chimney, how to reglaze a window sash, how to replace rotted porch boards with salvaged lumber. Her hands blistered and then calloused. Her back ached in places she had not known contained muscle. She dropped 11 pounds in 6 weeks. Her hair, which she had been coloring for 20 years, grew out silver at the roots, and she let it. In the second month, she turned her attention to the carriage house. It was 22 feet square. 1 story. The door was locked with a cast-iron padlock that took her a full afternoon to break. Inside, she found a room she was not prepared for. It was a studio, not a carriage house at all. The floor was laid in the same chestnut as the main house. There was a north-facing window the size of a door, paned with wavy handmade glass. A long drafting table ran the length of the back wall. A set of built-in shelves held rolled plans, dozens of them, each one tied with brown twine. On the wall above the drafting table hung a framed diploma. School of Architecture, University of Pennsylvania, 1929. Theodosia Merriweather. And below it, in smaller letters on a brass plate screwed to the frame, first woman admitted to the program. Thesis distinction. Imogene sat down on the floor. She had not known. Nobody had told her. Her own mother, Theodosia's sister, had gone to her grave without saying the word architect in connection with her elder sibling, ever. She untied one of the rolls. The drawing was a set of elevations for a small bank building, signed T. Merriweather, 1933, and stamped at the bottom with the name of a Philadelphia firm she vaguely recognized. Designed under the supervision of, the stamp read, and listed 2 male names. But the lines were Theodosia's. The handwriting matched the letter in Imogene's trunk exactly. She untied another roll. A schoolhouse in Wilkes-Barre, 1937. Designed under the supervision of. Another. A department store in Scranton, 1940. Designed under the supervision of. Roll after roll, building after building, 35 years of work, none of it in her own name. Imogene sat on the chestnut floor and cried for the first time since the divorce. Not for herself. For the woman who had sent her a letter across 30 years and asked her, quietly, to come and look. Reggie Okonkwo found her in April, 6 months after she'd arrived in Ravenscombe. She was on a ladder reglazing a first-floor window when she heard tires on the gravel. A dented Subaru wagon pulled up, and a tall man in his early 70s with silver hair, cropped close, and steel-rimmed glasses climbed out, holding a thermos in one hand and a clipboard in the other. He didn't approach. He just stood at the edge of the driveway, looking up at the turret, the way a doctor looks at an X-ray. "That's a Philadelphia Queen, Anne," he said, when she finally climbed down. 1890s, probably commissioned by one of the mine operators. Your conical turret still has its original finial, which I can see from here, which means whoever built this knew what they were doing and whoever maintained it loved it. I heard in town there was a woman restoring it alone. I had to come see. And you are? Reginald Okonkwo, retired from the Pennsylvania Historical and Museum Commission. Preservation Field Office. 31 years. My wife passed 2 years ago. I've been looking for something to pay attention to. He held up the thermos. I brought coffee. I'm not asking to help. I'm asking to look. Imogene studied him. Her trust in strangers had thinned to a blade since the divorce. But there was something direct in his face, something unembarrassed about his own loneliness, that made her step back from the door. "Come in," she said. "Mind the third floorboard in the foyer. It's going to kill somebody eventually." He walked the house for 2 hours. He ran his palm along the banister. He crouched at the base of the newel post and read the TM 1894 inscription. He measured the width of the hall with a laser tool he pulled from his jacket pocket. He tapped the plaster in 4 different rooms and listened. When he came back out to where she was repacking her glazing putty, his face was different. "Imogene, this house is nationally significant. Do you understand that? I know it's old. It's not just old. It's intact. I've surveyed maybe 800 Queen Annes in this state in my career. I have never seen one with original hardware, original glass, original floor, original turret finial, original interior trim, and original stained glass all in the same building. This house is a time capsule, and whoever designed it was operating at a level of craft that very few builders in this region ever reached." "Her name was Theodosia Merriweather," Imogene said. "She was my great-aunt. She designed over 100 buildings in Pennsylvania and was never credited for a single one of them." Reggie looked at her for a long moment. "Show me." She took him to the carriage house. He stood in front of the framed diploma without speaking. Then he walked to the shelves and touched the end of one of the twine-tied rolls, gently, the way a person touches something that might dissolve. "May I?" She nodded. He untied 4 rolls. He stood over the drafting table with his glasses pushed up on his forehead and examined the drawings one by one. And when he was done, he sat down on the stool and put both hands flat on the table. "Imogene," he said, "I know 3 of these buildings. I surveyed the Wilkes-Barre Schoolhouse in 1998. It's on the National Register. The firm of record is Caldwell and Penrose. There has never, in the entire preservation literature of this state, been mention of a Theodosia Merriweather. That's what I thought. This is not a restoration project anymore. This is a recovery project. For her. Do you want help?" "Yes." He nodded once, like they had signed something. Reggie came 3 days a week after that. He brought his own tools, his own lunch, and his own opinions, which he offered only when asked. He did not try to take over. He treated Imogene as what she was, which was the architect of record on a complex preservation job, and he addressed her by her professional name, Ms. Vass, when other people were around, which was more often now, because word was spreading. In June, he made a phone call. Dr. Jocelyn Hartwell drove up from the University of Pennsylvania School of Design the following Saturday. She was 52, half Korean, wore work boots under a linen dress, and had written the current standard textbook on women in early American architecture. She spent 6 hours in the carriage house. She photographed every drawing. She photographed the diploma. She photographed Imogene, with permission, holding one of Theodosia's elevations. "I have been researching this period for 20 years, Dr. Hartwell said, sitting on the porch steps at dusk. There are 3 women I can name who practiced architecture in Pennsylvania before 1940. Your aunt is the 4th. Her body of work, if we can authenticate the attributions in these drawings, is larger than the other 3 combined. This is a major find, not a regional one, a national one. What happens now?" Imogene asked. "Now we write. Together, if you're willing. And we apply for a National Register nomination for this property under its own historical merit. And I introduce you to the Heritage Hollow Preservation Guild, which funds adaptive reuse projects led by underrepresented practitioners, and which is going to lose its collective mind when I tell them what's sitting on this hillside." Imogene watched the light fade behind the turret. Reggie was inside, washing out coffee cups. "Dr. Hartwell," she said quietly, "I was an architecture student. A long time ago. I never practiced." "Ms. Vass," Dr. Hartwell said, "you are practicing right now." Hollis arrived on a Saturday in late August. Imogene was on the wraparound porch, now structurally sound on all 4 sides, scraping 50 years of lead paint off the original porch ceiling beadboard. She heard the Range Rover before she saw it, the low, confident purr of a V8 that did not belong on a gravel road. She did not come down from her stepladder. He parked badly, one tire on the grass, and got out in loafers and a navy quarter-zip and sunglasses that cost more than her propane bill for the winter. He stood at the bottom of the porch steps, taking in the house with the same appraising look he had given every job site for 30 years. The look that assessed, that priced, that cataloged what a thing could be extracted for. "Jeannie," he said, "you've been busy." "Alice." The guy at the hardware store gave me directions. He seemed to know you. "Most people here do. May I come up?" "You may stand where you are." He took off the sunglasses. He tried, briefly, the face he used to use when he wanted her to forgive something. It had not worked in a decade, and it did not work now. "I wanted to see how you were doing. I heard you'd gone up into the coal country and bought an old house. I was worried." "You weren't worried enough to return 2 voicemails or reply to 1 email in 10 months. Why are you actually here?" He glanced at the turret, at the rebuilt porch, at the stacks of restoration-grade lumber under tarps in the side yard, at the new copper downspouts that had cost her 6 weeks of careful budgeting. "I've been talking to some preservation people in Philadelphia about the Merriweather find. It's impressive, Jeannie. I want you to know I think it's genuinely impressive. I also want to be practical with you. This property, with that story attached to it, could be worth real money. Developers who specialize in heritage tourism are already circling. I have relationships. I can help you move this at a serious number. I take a broker's fee only. Friendly terms. How much do you think it's worth?" she asked, curious in the clinical way she had become curious about many things in the last several months. "Depending on condition and the National Register application timing. 900,000. Maybe $1.2 million on the right day to the right buyer. It's already appraised for 1.7, Imogene said. And it's not for sale. Not to you. Not to your contacts. Not ever. The Theodosia Merriweather Archive is going to operate out of the carriage house as a permanent educational facility. The Heritage Hollow Preservation Guild is signing a 40-year stewardship partnership with me next month. The house is being entered into an irrevocable preservation trust that legally prevents its sale for profit. So you've had a long drive for nothing, Hollis. I'm sorry about your gas." His face changed then. She had known it would. She had watched it change across a kitchen island for 35 years whenever a deal went sideways. The affable mask dropped, and the thing underneath, the thing that had built an empire by never, ever losing a negotiation, came forward. "You bought this property with marital assets, Jeannie. I bought this property with my divorce settlement, which was final and unconditional. My attorneys disagree. Then we'll let them disagree in court." He put his sunglasses back on. He did not say goodbye. She listened to the Range Rover retreat down the gravel lane, and she stayed on her ladder, and she finished the section of beadboard she had been scraping, and she did not let her hands shake until after the sound of the engine had died. The certified letter arrived 9 days later. The suit was an ambush of invented claims. Fraudulent concealment of the Merriweather inheritance during divorce proceedings. Improper use of marital settlement funds on a property with undisclosed material value. Claim for constructive trust over a percentage of the appreciated estate. It was, as Barrett Montclair explained to her in his Ravenscombe office the next afternoon, legally baseless. It was also, he said, going to be expensive and exhausting to make go away. He knows he won't win, Barrett said. He's hoping the cost breaks you before a judge does. Can I afford to fight it? You can, barely. But it will eat most of what you'd budgeted for the East Wing work this winter. Imogene was quiet. Then she said, then we fight it. The litigation dragged through autumn. Trevor called for the first time in a year to tell her she was being vindictive and small. Kendall called to say she hoped her mother understood what this was doing to the family. Imogene said the family had done this to itself long ago, and that if Kendall wanted to mend anything between them, it would not be through brokering on Hollis's behalf. Kendall hung up crying. Trevor did not call again. Reggie brought her dinner twice a week. Dr. Hartwell wrote her a letter that began, "My dear Ms. Vass," and ended with a promise that the University of Pennsylvania School of Design would cover the cost of her legal defense as an official protection of scholarly work in progress. Barrett filed the paperwork the following Monday. By November, Hollis's attorneys had filed 7 separate motions and had achieved exactly nothing. He had expected her to fold. She had not folded. And the story, which had stayed local up until that point, was about to become something much larger, because on a Tuesday morning in early December, a reporter named Priya Kavanaugh knocked on the front door of the house that officially did not exist. Priya Kavanaugh was 34, freelance, and had been chasing the Theodosia Merriweather story for 3 weeks before she found her way to Ravenscombe. She had come up on a tip from a graduate student in Dr. Hartwell's department who had mentioned casually that the biggest architectural rediscovery of the decade was happening in a boarded-up house in the coal country, and that the woman doing the rediscovering was being sued by her ex-husband for the privilege. Priya had cold emailed Dr. Hartwell, then cold called Reggie, then driven 4 hours without calling ahead because, as she later told Imogene, some stories you have to see standing up. Imogene almost turned her away. She had done no press. She had, if anything, avoided it. But Priya, standing on the restored porch in a canvas jacket with a notebook in her hand, had said the thing that changed it. "Ms. Vass, I read your aunt's thesis advisor's obituary in the Penn archives last week." He called her the most gifted student he ever taught, in a private letter that was never published. He died in 1962. For 64 years, nobody has said her name in print. "Give me a day. Let me try." Imogene gave her 2. The piece ran in a national Sunday magazine on the first weekend of January. The headline was "The House That Nobody Knew Existed," and the woman who was never supposed to find it. It was 9,000 words. It traced Theodosia's career from her 1929 diploma through 3 decades of uncredited buildings attributed to men who had signed over her drawings. It traced Imogene's own trajectory, the Cornell thesis, the abandoned graduate program, the 35 years of silent drafting for Hollis, the $42,000 settlement, the motel, the trunk, the letter. It named Hollis. It named the lawsuit. It quoted the language of his filings verbatim, which was the most damaging thing Priya could have done, because on the page, stripped of his charm, his claims read exactly like what they were: a man attempting to extract value from a woman's recovered inheritance after having already extracted value from her for half her life. Dr. Hartwell was quoted. Reggie was quoted. Peter Hofstadter from the hardware store was quoted, which delighted Imogene when she read it, and which said, in its entirety, she paid cash. She asked good questions. She's the best thing that's happened to this town in 40 years. The piece went in magazine terms supernova. It was picked up by the architectural press, the preservation press, the women's interest press, the legal press, and, eventually, the wire services. A clip of Dr. Hartwell explaining Theodosia's erasure on a national morning show ran on a Tuesday, and by Wednesday morning Imogene had 4,300 unread emails. On the following Friday, Hollis's attorneys filed to dismiss the lawsuit without prejudice. Barrett Montclair read the filing, smiled a private smile, and faxed her a copy with a single sentence scrawled at the top. He ran. The lawsuit was over. The press did not stop. What surprised Imogene most was not the architectural world's response, though that was significant, nor the speaking invitations, which she declined. It was the letters, actual letters on actual paper, in handwriting that trembled or slanted or looped in the deliberate script of women who had been taught penmanship in the 1950s. They came from Tucson and Tallahassee and Duluth, from Sacramento and Buffalo, and a place in Kentucky Imogene had to look up on a map. They all said, in different words, the same thing. "I was a nurse. I wanted to be a doctor. I gave it up. I am 72 now. Is it too late? I study biology. I married a pastor. My notebooks are in a box in the garage. Is it too late? I am 68. I stopped painting in 1981. Is it too late?" Imogene read every one. She did not have time to answer all of them, but she answered some. And then, on a Sunday in March, sitting at Theodosia's drafting table with Reggie pouring coffee in the corner, she said, "We should teach." "We should," Reggie said, as if he had been waiting. The first workshop ran the following June. Reading a Building, an introduction to historic assessment for women over 50. Imogene set the upper age limit at 78 because she was being, she said, realistic. She advertised it through Dr. Hartwell's department. She capped enrollment at 12. 47 women applied. She ran the workshop twice that summer and 3 times the summer after. The Heritage Hollow Preservation Guild funded the conversion of the main house's first floor into a teaching space. The second floor remained Imogene's private apartment. The carriage house became the Theodosia Merriweather Archive, open by appointment, with Theodosia's drawings framed along the walls under museum-grade glass, each one now bearing a new brass plaque. T. Merriweather, architect. No supervising firm listed. The attribution corrected, 60-odd years late. Women came to study. Some stayed a weekend. Some stayed a month. One woman, a 71-year-old retired accountant from Harrisburg named Lucinda, stayed 11 weeks and left with a provisional apprenticeship at a preservation firm in Reading. Another, 66, a former bank manager named Othelia, went home to Wheeling and started a neighborhood survey of unlisted Victorian houses in her town. Reggie handled the curriculum. Imogene handled the buildings. Dr. Hartwell came up once a semester to lecture. Peter Hofstadter gave the new students a standing 10% discount at the hardware store, which he announced at every opening dinner, and which nobody had asked him to do. The house that nobody knew existed had, somehow, in 2.5 years, become the place that a lot of people were coming to find. Willa came first. She was 15 that autumn, Kendall's daughter, tall and serious, and wearing a canvas barn coat that looked like something out of a catalog her grandmother would once have flipped through without ordering from. She arrived on a Saturday in October, unannounced, driven by her mother, who waited in the car at the bottom of the lane for a long time before finally walking up to the porch. Imogene was on her knees in the front parlor, rehanging a section of baseboard. She heard the footsteps on the porch boards and looked up, expecting a student or a guild inspector or Reggie back from the hardware store. Instead, she saw her granddaughter, whom she had not been allowed to see in nearly 3 years. "Grandma," Willa said. She was holding a printout of Priya's article, folded into a square. Imogene sat back on her heels. Then she stood up slowly and wiped her hands on her work apron and crossed the room and held her granddaughter for the first time since the girl was 12 years old. Kendall was on the porch now, her hands in her coat pockets, not coming inside. She had been crying in the car, Imogene could see. Not the performative, crying Imogene remembered from the divorce phone calls. Something quieter and much older. "Mom," Kendall said, "I don't know how to start this." "Then don't start it yet. Come in. I'll make coffee." She gave them a tour. She showed Willa the stained glass on the landing, the brass medallion on the newel post, the drafting table where her great-great-aunt's plans still rested under archival weight. Willa asked intelligent questions in a quiet voice. Kendall did not say much until they reached the carriage house, where she stopped in front of the framed diploma, read the brass plate beneath it, and said, without turning around, "You told me once, when I was about her age, that you'd wanted to be an architect." I laughed. "I'm sorry, Mom. I'm so sorry." "I know," Imogene said. "Dad told us you were having a breakdown." "I know he did. I chose to believe him because it was easier." "I know that, too." They sat on the porch steps after Willa had gone back into the main house to keep reading through Theodosia's papers, which she had not stopped asking about since they arrived. The October light was turning gold. Kendall held her coffee with both hands. "I don't expect things to go back to how they were," she said. "They can't," Imogene said. "I'm not the woman I was, Kendall. I'm not going to manage your father's feelings for you. I'm not going to pretend the last 3 years didn't happen. If you want to know me, you're going to have to know the person I actually am now, not the mother you remember. I want that. Then we can start." Trevor never came. He sent a birthday card once, the following March, signed only with his name. Imogene kept it in a drawer. She did not write back. Some doors close because someone walks through them in the other direction, and some close because no one ever walked through them at all. She had learned, finally, the difference. Hollis married Sienna Brooks in a waterfront ceremony in Stone Harbor in June. Imogene heard about it from Willa, who reported it with the flat disapproval only teenagers can properly deploy. Imogene felt, standing in her kitchen with a cup of tea going cold in her hand, exactly what she had felt about Hollis for the last 1.5 years, which was nothing. Not satisfaction. Not regret. An empty room where a person used to live. She set the tea down and went back to the blueprints on her dining table. And by the time she remembered the wedding again, it was the following week, and she could not recall the day it had happened. On the 3rd anniversary of her arrival in Ravenscombe, the house hosted an open day. Over 140 people came. former students from every workshop. Reggie, who made a short speech about craft and patience that made several people cry. Dr. Hartwell, who announced the publication date of the forthcoming monograph. Merriweather, the architect who was not there. Barrett Montclair, looking proud in a blazer too big for him. Peter Hofstadter, who had closed the hardware store for the afternoon for the first time in the 31 years he had owned it. Kindle. Willa, with a sketchbook under her arm that had not left her hand in 6 months. Imogene stood at the top of the porch steps at dusk, looking out at the people spread across the lawn she had cleared by hand, talking in small clusters under a turret she had reslated one row at a time. And she thought about the sidewalk in Chestnut Hill, and about the cold tea in the ceramic mug, and about the 21-year-old in the Cornell studio at 3 in the morning, and about Theodosia at her drafting table in 1933 signing a drawing she would never be credited for. She had lost, when her marriage ended, the thing she had been told to build a life on. A house, a name, the loyalty of her children, the identity of 35 years. It had been, briefly, the end of everything. But in losing it she had found what remained, which turned out to be enough. Knowledge that had not expired. A woman, now 2 women, whose work had not died. The steady grace of building something that would outlast her. She was 67 years old. Her life had started, for the second time, 3 years earlier, on the day she carried 3 suitcases to the curb. If you have been told it's too late, if the dreams you shelved are gathering dust in some attic of your own, if you have ever suspected that the second half of a life can be larger than the first, then this story is for you. Share it with someone who needs to remember that what the world boards up and forgets is sometimes the exact house you were meant to find. That knowledge never expires. That the best revenge is not proving anyone wrong, but finally proving yourself right. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.